Hi there, Gwen again. This is the fourth and final video in the series I'm doing on trauma. And in the first video, I talked about the different types of trauma. In the second video and essay, I talked about the physiological impacts of trauma. And in the third video, I talked about the emotional and psychological impacts of trauma. And today I wrote about and I'm going to talk a bit about using the terms healing trauma in comparison to using the term processing trauma. I wrote in the essay that about a year ago, I stopped using the phrase healing trauma. And I talked about my reasons for that. And the main gist of it is that when we talk about healing something, we are talking about repairing and making it as if the thing never happened. Right? So when we heal a cut, right, on our arm, we typically do it so that we don't have a scar, right? We would never know that we cut ourselves in 2 weeks later when everything's all the scab and everything's all gone, right? We'd never know that we actually cut ourselves there, until unless we remember or we tell someone that we did. That's not how trauma works, right? We can't heal it and make ourselves as if the the traumatic events never happened. The truth is that trauma changes us. It changes us genetically, and it changes us in the ways that we are with the world. We can't pretend that an event didn't happen, and we can't ever go back to being the person we were before that event happened. Those events change us. And how we choose to move forward, knowing that, is where resilience starts to come in, and where our ability to process and sort of bounce back comes in. When I say bounce back, I again don't mean that we go back to the person we were before a traumatic event. I mean that now we've found meaning from the event. We've given meaning to our own lives, and we are moving forward with our lives. We're finding pleasure, we're finding joy, we're finding relationship, we're finding our own ways of being in the world that aren't in an always fully activated and triggered state. So I stopped using the word healing and began using the word processing. Processing our trauma is what we do. We process the event. We allow it to move through us and to have the impact it's going to have, and to also mitigate and in some ways steer the impact that it will have. So trauma impacts our nervous systems, right? That's just a given. What we can do is we can learn ways to soothe our nervous systems. We can learn ways to calm our nervous system and to calm our brainstem, and to be able to move from really anxious states into calmer states, right? We can learn how to feel our bodies, how to be in our bodies, how to sit with not only pleasure and also to sit with discomfort, right? To be present with ourselves. We can learn how to find our own center and ground, how to be present not only in our bodies, but also in the moment, right? And in the space we are in. We can find ways to listen to our bodies and ourselves, and to hear what our body has to say, and to understand and get curious about ourselves. I talked about that curiosity in the last video, how important that is, how important it is to be curious about ourselves. and how that's part of being able to connect to community, right? To understand what are our motivations. Why am I acting this way? Why am I isolating myself? Why do I push people away in the way that I do? What is that really about, right? What am I protecting myself from? So as we process, right, as we learn to soothe our systems, as we learn to find our boundaries, to come to center and ground, and to deeply listen to our own bodies, and find ways to tolerate physical and emotional discomfort, as well as find ways to tolerate pleasure. Because as odd as this sounds, for many people who have experienced trauma and who live outside of their bodies, pleasure, or what most people would consider to be pleasurable, actually can have very uncomfortable feelings that come up for us. And so what is supposed to be pleasurable is actually really not at all. And as we're able to move into our bodies, to connect to these boundaries, to connect to ourselves, to connect to our no, to find our own ways of being, right? To connect to the now, we can then start to actually feel things that are meant to be pleasurable as pleasurable, right? The flip side of that, of course, is that we also learn to tolerate things that are actually really unpleasant and uncomfortable. It's I like the analogy, or the idea of how uncomfortable it is when we start to speak our feelings, right? When we start to open up to someone about a way that they hurt us, right? And how that causes like all kinds of anxiety within us, because what will happen, and will they reject us, and how is this going to impact our relationship, and blah 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 blah, right? It all impacts our sense of belonging, which again I talked about in the last video, and also the more we are able to connect to those emotions of I've been hurt, the more we are able to speak to the other person and say, hey, this hurt me, in a way that's not blaming, in a way that's not, accusing, and is in a way of sharing about ourselves. And as those people who we only do this with people who we trust, right? And as those people who we trust respond in loving ways of, not defensive ways, right? But in loving ways of, wow, I didn't mean to do that. Or I didn't know that that would impact you in that way. Or my intention was, and I hear that I hurt you and I'm really sorry, right? As we get those responses, it actually then becomes easier and less uncomfortable to share, right? To share with that person, hey, this kind of bugged me, right? Or this really hurt, or, whatever the thing is, right? As well as be able to share, hey, I really, really liked when you did X. That made me feel really good. Which also can be really uncomfortable, right? It can be really uncomfortable to share with another person the ways that they made us feel good. It can be as uncomfortable as sharing the ways that they hurt us, because it is again being vulnerable, and it is again sharing a part of ourselves with another person. And as I talked about last time, trauma wants us isolated. It does not want us connected. It does not want us in community. It does not want us in relationship, right? So it takes practice. It takes practice, and it's a process, and it does not happen overnight, and it does take time, and it can be done, right? I don't believe we can heal our trauma. I don't believe it ever goes away. I believe it stays with us, and it does have its impact on us, and it does change the course of our lives in either big or small ways. And how we allow it to change the course of our lives is where we get to have our autonomy and our control and our will, right? So in processing trauma, in not only talking about it, but also in doing body-centered therapies that help, be those somatic psychological therapies, be that the trauma-informed embodiment approach that I've developed, be that acupuncture, massage, chiropractic, yoga, running, right? Whatever the ways are that help you process your trauma, we need both. We need both to be able to talk about it, and we need to be able to do the nonverbal work of listening to our bodies and letting our bodies move things through as it needs. And to release some of it, right? To release the hold it has on our nervous system, to release the hold it has on our neuropaths, and to create new neuropaths, right? So that we can be in the world differently. And also know how to sit in the discomfort, to know how to live with the reality that this event happened to us, right? We can't change that. We can't change the past. We can't change reality. And we can choose how to move forward with it. So this is the last video in this series. And this series was not only a bit of psychoeducation for y'all on trauma, it was also to introduce the program that I'm offering that begins on February 1st. On my trauma-informed embodiment approach, and doing the level 1 work of that, which is a 6-month program. And it is limited to 12 people. As of this recording, there were 11 spaces left. So please sign up, but this is going out a couple weeks after I've recorded it, so you'll have to check the website to see how many spaces are actually still left. I would love to have you join me for that. It is a trauma processing program. We will be doing the work. We'll be doing it on calls. You'll be getting emails, all of that. I am also offering a sexual trauma support group that will begin on February 1st that is not processing trauma, but is a support group to find others who have experienced sexual trauma and to talk about current world and local events that are triggering that, be that, you know, here in the U.S., our president, or any of our Congress people, or the onslaught of celebrities who have been accused and who have come forward with sexual assault and harassment. How all of that is bringing up our own stuff and how we are managing that and coping that and finding community around it. So both of those things begin on February 1st. One, again, is a support group and support group only, and the other is meant to be processing our trauma and to begin to do that work of finding our ways of being in the world and calming our nervous systems and connecting to our bodies and coming home to ourselves. So links to all of these, along with the essay that goes with this video, are there down in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this elsewhere, you're either seeing it on my blog, so you're already there, or if you're seeing this on Facebook or in my newsletter, then you'll see the links connected to the video too. Okay, sending you love, and here's to processing our trauma in 2018. Okay.